All right, so welcome back to my channel. We are on to block 2 of the Pathway Home Quilt Along. We will be sewing together the log cabin house block. So here's the block there, all finished. It is a nice big block, and you'll notice the log cabin portion under the roof peak of the house. So there's a lot of traditional piecing here in this block. You will be assembling a log cabin block and then topping it off with a flying geese block to create the house look. So I'm going to walk you through all the portions of this block. We are going to start with the cutting. So I will provide a cut chart for you and show you a little bit of the cutting. And then we will move on to piecing together the log cabin portion of the block. I will give you some ideas on keeping really organized with your log cabin pieces because they are small and there are a lot of them. So once we get the log cabin block piece, I'll show you how to make the flying geese block for the roof and how to bring the background pieces together to assemble this block. You will be creating 5 of these blocks, and they are a little more time consuming than last week's double 9 patch block, but I do think it is a lot of fun and it is a lot of good practice for piecing those smaller pieces and just making a traditional log cabin block. All right, I also give some tips on making the process a little quicker with the log cabin block by chain piecing them. So keep an eye out for those little bits of information that will help piece this block a little bit faster. All right, so with all that said, let's jump into cutting the pieces for this block.
First, cut your background fabric. You will cut 2.5 inch by width of fabric strips, then cut those down into 10 2.5 inch by 7.5 inch A blocks. After that, you'll cut 2 8-inch by width of fabric strips, and then you will cut those down into 8-inch squares. You will need to cut 5 8-inch squares. Then you will cut those along the diagonal ones for your bead blocks. After you get those cut, you will cut 4 3.5 inch by width of fabric strips. You will cut those down to 10 3.5 inch by 11.5 inch C blocks. Now from your leftover light and dark quarter yard cuts, you will cut 3 to 4 1.5 inch by width of fabric strips from those. Then you will subcut those down per the provided chart. Those will all be your log cabin blocks. Now, when you are using your chart, I highly recommend laying them out on a design board to help you keep them all organized. Now from your leftover quarter yard accent fabric, you will cut 5 2.5 inch squares. Those are going to be on the center of your log cabin. I like to cut my log cabin strips as I'm working and laying them out along a design board to keep them all organized. You can see that here. All right, so from your half yard roof fabric, you're going to cut 2 15.25 inch squares. And then once you get those squares cut, you're going to cut it along the diagonal twice. And these will be your F blocks.
All right, so after all of the cutting is finished for the log cabin house block, you'll be able to start sewing. Now, I highly recommend laying out all your log cabin pieces on a design board to keep them all organized, and it'll make it much easier to sew them together. Plus, you can visually see if any of the same kind of log strips are the same and touching, and make sure you like the layout. So I make these design boards myself. It's just cardboard with some fusible fleece on top. I do have a video that shows how to put them together. They are so easy though. I mean, you really don't need a video to put them together. Make sure it's on. So see how it's all laid out nice and easy to keep everything organized. So to sew all these together, I have a diagram available to you so you can see the order. It is very easy, just a simple log cabin layout, but I'm going to show you how to sew some of it so you get the idea of the format, but then you can refer to the diagram to get all the rest of the blocks on. And there you go. There's just kind of a closer look at the log cabin all laid out on my design board. So I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and start sewing it all together. Okay, so the first block I'm going to grab is the center block O and then a rectangular strip I. And I'm going to take them and line I up on one edge of O and put it right sides together and then sew a 1/4 inch seam along the side. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do this step to all 5 of the blocks I'm going to make because we are making 5 of these house blocks. So I just kind of find it easier to do all of that step at once. And you can, of course, sew one block at a time together. That's fine as well. But I feel like this will just make it a tad bit easier to sew them all at the same time. So you can see I'm just chain piecing across there. Just one right after another until I get all 5 of them finished. All right, so then you can see I have all 5 of them sewn, so I'm just going to cut them apart now. And then I am going to heat set them as well, but I am just going to fold them over and kind of finger press them first. My pressing station over here by my sewing machine is kind of softer. It's like has a cushion to it. So pressing them on this harder surface over to get them started is a lot easier than doing it on my pressing station. And I have just found with time, with how much I've been sewing, that doing this step and kind of pressing it over first and making sure that crease is nice and even because you can feel it better with your fingers just kind of ensures a nice crisp press. So I'm going to take all 5 of these and take them to my little pressing area. That's really just, I'm just going to add a few seconds of heat here because I starched these. They really already lay nice and crisp from that with just a little heat on them. I've also found that if I'm patient and just let these sit here and cool off a little, they lay a lot flatter than if I try to move them around when they're still warm as well. So while I let them cool a little bit, I'm just going to let them sit here. That's why I move them away from the heat as well. I can see that the next block that goes on here is H. So don't really want to move them too much, but so if I look at my diagram here, I've sewed O to I, and now I need the H block that will go on the bottom. And I like to move these and kind of keep them lined up with how that layout needs to be. And then I see that I have my I blocks here, and I can tell that it'll fit nice and perfect there. So just like that, I know I'm on the right track. So I'll take these and set them in my sewing area. And on my sewing area, I kind of lay them there. Now you can see it so that I know exactly where they go. Now, size wise, you'd be able to really tell either way. I mean, it's only going to be able to go in that one spot, but it just kind of helps me keep everything organized. And you can tell from my block and my layout as well that I'm doing a kind of more traditional log cabin design here because I have kind of the redder center and then one kind of side is darker and lighter on the other. If you watched my series that I have of little short videos on my channel, I did a few videos just talking about the history of some traditional quilt blocks. One of the blocks I did was the log cabin block, and I did get a lot of pushback on it because of my pronunciation, but I still thought it was really interesting reading about the block. And I always wondered why kind of that one kind of corner was dark and the other was light. And it's because it kind of represents the shadows on a house or a log cabin because, the sun's going to move throughout the day. One side's going to be darker because it's in the shade and the other lighter. And I just found that really, really interesting. So, with knowing the history of some of these older and more traditional blocks, I think it's kind of fun to, give a little nod back to the history of quilting and do them in a more traditional way sometimes. All right, so I have one more to sew on. So just kind of make sure you're following those strict quilting rules that your blocks are right sides together before you sew that 1/4 inch seam. I sure know I've gotten in a groove with sewing before and stuff doesn't end up right sides together and you just kind of grab it the way it's laying. So just sometimes you got to focus and make sure that you're doing everything right. All right, so I'm going to press this one, and as I press, I can look and see what strip is going to be going on here next. And we are actually doing another H strip on because kind of have the same distance there you can see as this one you went on, and that'll happen a lot. You have a few that go on the block that are the same size. So in that case, if you're doing this like I am, where you're doing light and dark, you just want to make sure you don't get the light strip and the dark strip mixed up when you're putting them on. And that's why I really like to lay them out. That kind of ensures that that doesn't happen. All right, so press these. Like I said, I like to set them over to the cool side of my mat. And if you have a flapper, that works really well here too. Mine. Set it on there. That'll help set the seams. And with that too, I like to set it over to the cool side of my mat. It helps the seam cool down a little faster. And I feel like once it's cool, like I said, it really lays a lot flatter if you don't move it around after that too much. All right, so I'm going to grab my next fabrics here. So this is the one that I have that's going on next. All right, so I'm going to lay these blocks out the way it looks on the diagram. So I have O, I, H, and then I'm adding on the next H block. So I'm going to set these over by my sewing station the way they're going to go together. All right, so you can see my log cabin is growing larger there. So cut those threads, and then I'm going to finger press it open and take it over to the pressing area. So now we're going to have G go on, and that will completely enclose our center O square once we get that one on. I didn't notice when I was cutting this that I left some of the selvage on. I guess I didn't even notice, but that should get caught in the seam allowance, so I should be okay there. We will see though. All right, so now I need to grab my G strip, and so that'll fit right there. So we have O, I, H, and now G, and you can see how the lighter side is up on that corner and the darker over here. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and sew. And so hopefully you can really see how this block comes together. It is really a easy block to sew and follow. It's just with any block you want to be organized, read through the pattern first, see how it's built and how it goes together. But I think this one is one of my favorites to sew. It looks really fun if you do it scrappy. You don't have to have one side that's light and one side that's dark. You can really just build it and have a log cabin block that's, whatever fabrics that you want it. It doesn't have to have a light and a dark side. So there's a lot of things you can do with it to make it your own. And since it's such small pieces of fabric, you really could just raid your stash and make this block as well. All right, there it goes. So I'm going to cut these and press it, and then I'll show you the next block that goes on, and I'll do that a few more times so you can really get it see it getting built. But I won't be showing each and every step for a little bit because I think that you can really see how this block is built already. All right, so I have the block all pressed, and you can see I have the G strip laid out here, and we're kind of back where we started on the side that we first sewed on. So still just working around the block. So I'm going to sew these on, and I will cut the threads, finger press it, and then I will show you the next block that goes on. All right, so now that we have the block G put on the side here, we're moving on to block J, and that will go underneath on the bottom here. Right, so I'm going to sew that right sides together. Then after sewing it onto all 5 blocks, I will cut the threads, finger press, and then show you the next block that will go on. All right, so we sewed our dark J strip on. So now we're sewing our light J strip onto the left side of the block. So I'm sure you can really see how this block is coming together now. And I'm sure you've also noticed that on my blocks, every single one has exactly the same fabrics in the same spot on each block as well. Now this is not something that you have to do. You could make each of your blocks completely different if you wanted to. You definitely don't have to have them all exactly the same like I have them. Make it your own, put the fabrics in different places, just do something fun and make it completely your own. Use all scrap fabrics, do your blocks however you want to do them. For me, it just made it easier since I knew I was going to sew them all together at the same time to make them all the same so that it doesn't matter if I grab a different block or they get mixed up with how I had them planned. I would definitely recommend if you're going to do different fabrics in different places and have them laid out the way you want to maybe sew one block at a time so that you make sure it comes together the way you intended for it to come together. Or if you have a lot of design boards, you could probably lay each one out on a separate design board too. I have all mine stacked together, so that makes it like kind of I know I would get all mixed up if I tried to do different blocks and had them laid out how I wanted them and tried to sew them all at once. I know I would become a mess, but some people are a lot more organized than I am. All right, so I'm going to cut these threads, finger press them, and press the block, and then I'll show you which strip goes on next. All right, so now that I have the J strip sewn on and pressed, I can now add the K strip on top here. So the K is going on top of the G and then the O in the center here. Right sides together, and I'll sew that in place. All right, so here is how my block is looking so far. I just sewed the K strip to the top here, and now I'll have the darker K strip on the side here. And again, we're just going to keep building around the block. So I'll show you how my blocks look when they are all finished. I think that I've shown enough of building the log cabin block that you can see how the rest of them go on. If you do need some more help, just let me know in the comments below. But I will let you take a look at my log cabin portion when it is all finished, and then I'll show you how to assemble the rest of the block. Mainly the only other assembling that you'll really have to do is the roof for this block, and the rest of the pieces are just background area that is already cut to size. So let me get this log cabin done. I'll show you how to make the roof and bring it all together. All right, so now that all of my log cabin blocks are finished, it's time to turn them into a house. Just look how cute these are. All right, so let me first show you how the house block looks. So really the main thing we need to do is get the roof built, and then we're just adding on the sides. So the block is really going to come together quick now. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to attach the sides onto the log cabin. The roof, if you notice, goes a little past the log cabin portion of the house, so you need to put these on next. So if you refer to the diagram for this block, you'll see that these are block C. So they're the wider of the background blocks that you cut for this log cabin house. So just attach them onto each side of the block. And notice that you still have that smaller eye block to the right side. So that's how you know you have this block oriented the right way. So you're going to put one on each side of all 5 of them. All right, and then you'll just press these. All right, and then here is how your block will look with the sides on. And just set those to the side, and then you're going to grab the blocks that you need for the roof. So for the roof, you'll need an F block and 2 B blocks. And you'll want to work one at a time. Fold one of your B blocks right side together with the F. And something I like to do, move these to the side so you can see better. When I'm sewing these kind of flying yeast blocks, I like to make sure that the triangles are aligned at the bottom. You'll want the overhang at the top peak because you'll want that 1/4 inch seam at the top to make sure you don't lose your point. So just bring it over this to the sewing machine once you get it lined up and sew a 1/4 inch seam. And then press. You'll want to try to be as gentle as you can with this seam because it is along the bias, it will want to stretch. So add some heat to get it nice and flat, and then you can add on the other side. So same way, right sides together, and then align the triangle along the bottom, and just know that there will be some overhang at the top, and then sew. Gently press. All right, so now you have the peak of the roof here. And so you'll just grab 2 of your A rectangles, they're the smaller ones, and they will go along the side of the roof. So just sew those in place and then press. All right, and then after pressing, this is how the roof of your house will look. So you're just going to take this block and put it on top of your log cabin block. So just put it right sides together and sew a 1/4 inch seam. All right, and so there is block 2 all finished. Here is the log cabin house block. I absolutely love how this turned out. It looks so good in these fall fabrics. This fabric line is called Autumnimity, something like that. And it is by Esther Fallon Lau, and it is through Clothworks. It's a gorgeous fabric line. So there is block 2, the house block. So next week we'll be able to bring the 2 blocks that we made together and add a border onto the quilt. I think it'll be a lot of fun and really finish off the look of this quilt. I hope you are enjoying the quilt along. I'm having so much fun putting these blocks together, and I hope you're enjoying it too. So let me know in the comments where you're at with assembling all of the blocks for this quilt along. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye.